Okay, welcome everyone to Coffee with the Kitsap County Association of Realtors. So today we are joined by some affiliates. Denise is one of our affiliate members, and we have Kathy Olsen, who is chair of our IDEA committee, and Jamie Haywood, who is the 2024 president-elect. So Kathy, I invited you to join us today because I really wanted to get a good idea and help our members have a good idea about this Pathways to Homeownership class that's really your brainchild, you're bringing to life, um, and what to expect with that. It's coming up here in June. Why don't you tell us about that?
Oh, sure. Thank you. Well, the Pathways to Home Ownership class is sponsored by what used to be called the DEI Committee, which is Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Of course, as realtors, we do subscribe and espouse the ideas of fair ownership opportunities for everyone in our communities. But we recognize that historically that hasn't always been true for specifically marginalized populations within each of our communities, and that's true nationwide. Well, as a response to that, the Realtors Association has promoted this idea that we need to have committees serving in each of our associations to specifically promote ideas of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And last week, I'm so proud of KCAR because we renamed the DEI committee to the IDEA committee. And the reason that we did so is that if you look at the federal fair housing guidelines, there's a lot of different specific protected classes outlined in there, and diversity, equity, and inclusion doesn't really cover the breadth of what we're trying to do. And so IDEA stands for inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. And the accessibility to home ownership is really what this class is focusing on for people that, especially if no one in their family has ever owned property, they are first-time property owners for their family. That's a way that they can generate generational wealth for their family and the people that come after them. It's a way that they can plan for their retirement. It's a way to stabilize their income in emergencies. There's a lot of different things that home ownership can do. And what we recognize is that that privilege has been unevenly enjoyed by different people in the communities historically. And that doesn't mean that we're going to be giving houses away or giving money away. What it does mean is that we want to give people a leg up in how they need to be thinking, even from when they're young, even from years before they actually are in a position to purchase, to have the income high enough to make a mortgage payment, especially in the Kitsap market. But what we want to do is smooth out that pathway for people and remove stumbling blocks for them as they're wrapping their mind around their pathway moving forward and enabling them to make the best decisions for themselves in building wealth.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. Like I said, this was your brainchild. And when you first started talking about it, what I found really exciting was your vision of this class creating opportunities and creating value, not just, in the community at large by helping to educate the community, but also by creating opportunities for our members to reach out into the community, into their spheres, and tell people about the class and create those opportunities for engagement of the members, and helping to create some valuable tools for our members.
Yes. And what we want ideally is that it's not the Kathy Olsen show or the IDEA committee show. It's really driven by the members and their affiliates. And the reason that we want that is that the membership in KCAR, we recognize that it's a spend. We recognize that there's money coming out of the pockets and off of the table, so to speak, of the realtors that are participating. But the Realtors Association has a historic role in our society of protecting homeownership rights and promoting homeownership in a way that is unique to any other special interest group. And so I recognize that the lawsuit, it makes people give pause, and it makes people doubt the legitimacy of the Realtors Association overall. But it's important to realize that there's a lot of things that the Realtors Association does beyond the lawsuit, beyond commission, because realtors, the commission has never set, especially in our area, it has never set commissions in Kitsap area. And so when we start looking beyond what the lawsuit means and start looking at, well, what should the Realtors Association actually be doing? Let's get back to that. Let's get back to
Yeah.
our roots of the reason that we're here. And it is to promote fair opportunities for homeownership, promote homeownership rights, and to advocate for individual homeowners in a way that they can't do for themselves. And
Right.
so we're looking at that. The homeowners, the Realtors Association does a lot of work with interviewing different candidates. For example, we're in an election year. So which candidate should our local chapter endorse in the local elections? And the realtors volunteer their time to go and interview the candidates and to see if we want to put our stamp of approval on different ones. And diversity, equity, and inclusion is one of the things that we're going to be looking at. Does that particular candidate, do they promote equity and inclusion in home ownership, and are they going to work with us in promoting opportunities for that at the local level? Or are they
Yeah.
going to fight against us because they hate realtors? Well, we need them to look past whatever their own bias is and actually help us help future homeowners and current homeowners to protect property rights and to promote homeownership.
Yeah. Advocacy and education. Like when I think about what it means to be a realtor, those are the two things that are the primary reason to me. It's that our advocacy work and our education programs. Um, so yeah. And one other thing that you touched on there, and that was another thing that just struck me whenever we first started talking about this, was your vision of this committee and the committee's work as, a lot of times people put DEI in these big buckets of race and religion and these
Mhm.
giant buckets that just seem so big. But really, diversity, it means so many different things. We have neurodiversity, we have cultural diversity, like all of these little
Mhm.
smaller buckets that really are much easier to access and understand and work with. Um,
Diversity is a fun thing to study. As part of my PhD studies, I do a lot of work with diversity and diversity in the workplace and what that means and how do you measure it. And one of the things that has come up is that creativity is linked to cognitive diversity, but there's no good way to measure cognitive diversity accurately. I mean, we're not going to be hooking up EEG machines to all of the subjects, right? And then
right.
following through the day. And so when we look, but what they did find is that demographic diversity is a good proxy variable for cognitive diversity. So when we put ourselves in a bubble of only associating with people that are like us, we're really ignoring a lot of color and breadth and liveliness in the rainbow of our lives that we could be enjoying, and just in more vibrancy in general as far as that goes, if we do associate with people that are unlike us.
Yeah.
And so that goes back to what are our own biases. The first time that I heard the word bias, I thought, well, for crying out loud, I'm not biased. I am a fair person. I do not identify as a person that has any kind of biases at all. But then I wanted to dive into it a little bit more. And so I made the point of studying, well, what really is a bias and a heuristic, and how do we use them all of the time? And there's like 180 different biases that people use on the regular, but biases and heuristics are really cognitive shortcuts that we use. And we use them because our brains are, this is going to get a little technical, but but this is legitimate information. Our brains burn about 20% of the calories that we consume. And so we use we use cognitive shortcuts to make it easier on our brains so we don't get headaches. Because
Yeah.
that's what a headache is when your brain's kind of overloaded. That's one of the reasons that a headache can occur. And so when we're taking those cognitive shortcuts, we do make rules for ourselves on what to assign meaning and be able to make the leap between where I am and where I want to be thinking and ignore everything else because I've taken this cognitive shortcut. The problem is when our biases get in the way of treating other people fairly, then we need to rethink our cognitive shortcuts. And so how do you know if you have one of those? If you feel negatively about a group in general, or if you look at somebody and make assumptions about them, you're taking a cognitive shortcut. Here's how my husband, he's a computer programmer, and he loves using this one. Of course, computer programmers, if you know any of them, they're just going to wear jeans and t-shirts to work, and the t-shirt might not even be clean. And so we do not look like we fit together, right? Because he's just going to wear his dad shirt all of the time, and he has a beard and stuff. And so we'll go shopping for something. And I can think back to a few years ago, we needed to buy a car. And so he's showing up in his like shorts and a t-shirt with his scruffy beard on. No one would talk to us in the car dealership because they all assumed they made a cognitive leap on what we were doing and what we could afford. And that's happened to us multiple times. And I know that if you go into a store or a restaurant, if you're not wearing the right kind of clothes, that people make an assumption about what you can afford, right? Because they're making a cognitive shortcut about you and your wealth. And
Yeah.
so we see it, all of us have experienced it, but what we're unaware of is when we ourselves are doing it, especially in real estate, we might be committing what's called microaggressions against people, which are little looks, little things that we say, tiny, tiny little things, and we don't recognize that we are being discriminatory in how we treat people. That's why we specifically have to address it and guard against it.
Yeah. It, I definitely agree. I can think of a few instances of that myself. Um, I guess we should get back to the class. So tell me, like, who's the target audience? Who should we be reaching out to? Who should we be encouraging our colleagues to reach out to?
This class is really, this specific one is being taught by Lee Wen, and he has designed this class as kind of a pre-buyer class. So this class is for people that what we're trying to do is change their mind about their capacity to purchase in the future. These are not people that are necessarily ready to buy something this month, this year, this season, but maybe if they know what they're looking for and they know what they need to do, we can start helping them find resources, first-time home buyer classes, or down payment assistance programs, so that they can be thinking differently about how to fix their credit, how to get themselves positioned with their employment, what they need to do to position themselves as a future homeowner. And so when we're looking at that, where do we find people like that? Anyone that can give us access to members in the community that might be that might need this class, such as pastors, community leaders, principals of schools, especially in the high school, or a professor in a college, OC or something. Those are the types of people that need to know about this class, because they're going to be the boots on the ground that can actually identify the people that would maybe need to know this information.
Okay.
This class isn't for everybody, and you had asked earlier about the role of the real estate agents in DEI. What we would really love from the KCAR committee is that the realtors that are participating are able to put participation in this program on their resume for future employment or business opportunities, that they've participated and actively promoted DEI values in their communities.
I think that's important, that we're creating value not just for the community, but for our members. So you mentioned Lee is has developed the class. Um, Let me see, I'm just looking at my list of questions here to see if there's something we haven't really covered. So tell me about, like, in your vision of this target audience, what are some of the barriers to homeownership that this group of people might be facing?
Well, some of them are cultural. For example, I had a client, probably 10 years ago, and the expectation in his culture is that as the firstborn son, that he financially care for all of his siblings and his parents. And
Wow.
so he was struggling to raise enough money for a down payment because he was constantly being expected to send money to the sister that wanted a new wardrobe, or this person was in the hospital, he needed to pay the bill or whatever. And so we recognize that there might be cultural barriers to a mentality around building wealth long term. The other thing is that if you are, or if there's a person that has been in an impoverished family, there is a mentality that kind of goes along with poverty that is, if there is any kind of resource and there's a shortage of someone in our little group, that the resource needs to be spent to lift all of us up. A rising tide lifts all boats kind of mentality. But the problem for that is that if the rising tide is not enough to get the boats out of the mud, so to speak, I know that's maybe a crude metaphor, but then what that means is that we're always kind of stuck in where we're at. And so helping the class members look past some of their familial and cultural expectations, and then being able to take what they learn in the class and go back to their own families and groups and communities and say, hey, look, we need to rethink how we're looking here. And we need to, even if we're pooling our resources, we need to figure this out so that we can get out of the circumstance we're at and change the trajectory of wealth in our family.
I love it. I think that's just so important. Um, well, my next question was going to talk about cultural stuff, but I think that you've addressed that. Um, Jamie, do
It's hard
you
to
have?
talk about that with sensitivity because there's this thinking, when we talk about what is a critical theory, critical race theory, any critical theory, the point of a critical theory is that you're criticizing why you think the way that you do, and you're questioning it. And so critical theory has gotten kind of a bad name because it's just dumped in the bucket of things that divide us instead of the things that unite us. But as we're criticizing, why, especially people that roll their eyes at the DEI committee, why are you doing that? What is it in you? You need to be thinking to yourself, why am I biased against the existence of this committee? What do I think and believe already that makes me feel this way? And so that is going to be true as we're working on this class material and working on helping demographics that have been marginalized to overcome that in our communities. We're going to be doing the same thing with them. Why do you believe what you currently believe? And can that change now that it's 2024? Do you still need to be working in 1965 mentality or 1940 or 1820 mentality from, whenever your ancestors arrived in this country? What is the mentality that you've inherited from generations that came before you that is affecting your beliefs now? And is it time for those beliefs to change?
That's heavy
It's a
stuff.
tough ask, right?
Yeah, it's a lot. Like, I mean, it's a lot
Yeah.
when you start really thinking about all of that. Um, so tell me, what do you think are some of the expected outcomes, or what do we hope the outcomes will be for the people that participate in the class?
Well, what my goal is that their attitude about their capability of homeownership in the future is changed, and that they're energized about their prospects and put home ownership on their bucket list of goals. I know that the goals are different for everybody and timing is different I know that life gets in the way of some of the things that we try to do, but the goal is for the class that we're changing the mentality of the future buyers, and that we're really creating a pool of people that will be positioned to buy in the future.
I think
And
that's
they'll
really
tell their friends,
exciting.
they're going to help their friends with their mentality too,
Yeah. Yeah.
as their ideas change, they'll change their friends.
Well, it's back to that rising tide lifts all boats, right? The more you
Mhm.
can get people educated, the more they help educate the people around them. So I think that's really important. Um, let's see. Do you envision the class having any long-term impacts for the community, or what's our long-term kind of vision here?
I think that's the hope. We are working in conjunction with the Housing Authority and also United Way. We would love to do work with the tribes, and we do have a contact that is connected with the tribes that can maybe help facilitate that. He doesn't know that yet. I haven't voluntold him to work with our committee yet, but I've introduced the ideas to the committee about the committee and what our goals are, and he's on board. But we'll see if he can help us connect with the tribes in a more meaningful way. And really, there's a lot that we can be doing in communities that are isolated from each other. It's interesting looking at group dynamics. Groups, I love this word, groupiness. Isn't that a fun word? It's a
Yeah.
real word that you can find in academic literature describing group theory. And a lot of groups have natural barriers to entry and exit as we kind of coalesce into these different special groups that can be aligned along the divisions that are outlined in fair housing. They can be racial divisions, religious divisions, ideology, political ideology divisions. There's lots of different ways that we segment each other from each other.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we're trying to build a vibrant community that is full of diversity. Bremerton is interesting because I grew up in Bremerton. I graduated proudly from Bremerton High, and I won't tell you what year because that'll age me, right? But
Yeah.
I
Hang on
grew up
just
there,
one
and
second. Hold that.
sure.
Sorry. My
Okay.
dog barking. So the joys of
I love your
doing
shirt,
this
by
with
the
you.
way. That's a cool one.
Oh, thank
It's
you.
very, very retro. Um, so I grew up in Bremerton, and we lived in a rental that was a converted duplex from the World War II housing. And they had removed the wall in the middle of the house. And so they'd made it into one big house instead of the two duplexes. But we had a lot of kids a lot of brothers and sisters crammed into this little house in East Bremerton. And so this is my community. This is my home. And the thing is about Bremerton is that the ratios are flipped. It should be that something like 60% homeowners and then 40% renters. But in Bremerton, it's backwards. We have way more renters than we do homeowners there, and that affects the social capital that the community is able to build. It affects people's buy-in of how they want their community to work and which types of groups they want to participate in. And what we want is, if we're going to build a strong community, we need to encourage homeownership, because that's what helps people set down permanent roots and really care about their community and the community's future.
You said it. Um, so what's our next step after this? Like we've got this class on June 20th, right? June 20th. And then so what comes after that?
Well, we really need to be looking at developing a series of classes that are helping the same type of demographic to understand finances. We do have one coming up in the fall that we're working on that will be geared towards financial planning and budgeting. And that goes right along with what we're trying to do. We recognize, here's the challenge. When we're as realtors, we're all business minded. We're all trying to get commissions, right? Like everything that we do is commission driven. But what we should be doing is thinking longer term about that, about building social capital within the community that we're serving, so that we're growing a base. And the
Right.
base will be something that can provide referrals to us as we go along in our career, not just this year, not just next year, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years. And we're developing a pipeline of people. And this
Right.
is part of developing that pipeline overall, individually as realtors, and then also for the community at large. And so what we want is that we're developing classes that kind of build on each other, that we can reuse and repurpose as time goes on and have different iterations of the class. If the sociological landscape of our community changes, we can alter the class to fit. This is not something that's set in stone. It's very, very malleable and workable about what our community needs from us as realtors. So this isn't us seeing what we can get from our community. It's the reverse of that.
Yeah.
What can we do to build our community? And then that bread that we cast on the water will come back buttered.
Yeah. And we should really like not be thinking about the next deal. We should be thinking about the deal next year and the year after, because the next deal is already like that's what we did a year ago or what have you. So I love
Right.
that. Um, let's see. Are you planning on gathering any feedback from the participants?
Well, of course we will, because you measure what matters. And so we do want to measure the feedback. There will be a survey time for them at the end, or they can just give their feedback, through calling us or whatever. We want to hear from them. And then we'll be following up with just a little email, emails of encouragement or whatever. If they want to be on that kind of list, they can opt out if they want, but just little things that kind of keep them going and keep them energized about the path that they're on, and also can help connect them with a realtor, whichever realtor is involved in teaching the classes, that they can take the lead in connecting with the people that came to their class and growing that. It won't be the Realtors Association that keeps track of everybody. We really want the realtors that are involved to facilitate those and build those relationships. And that's for the individual realtors' benefit as well.
And I think that's, one great reason for realtors to join our IDEA committee, because then they can have a role in that class and be able to help nurture those participants as they grow and build and get ready to enter homeownership, hopefully.
Yep.
Um,
Well,
yeah,
if you even think about it, Lori, a high school graduate, let's say that we just take that person and we say, hey, you know what? You can own a house someday. Here's what that would look like. Here's what you would need to do to get that ready. So now that brand new high school graduate can, they're working at an hourly paid job, but now they can go like, okay, well, what do I want my education to look like or trade school to look like so that I can buy a house when I'm 25, 24, 25, 23, however old, right?
yeah,
There's people that age that are buying homes. And why are they able to do that? It's because they thought early on about what they needed to do to position themselves in a few years to make that happen. And someone that's buying a house 5 years from now, can you imagine having taught this class 5 years ago and all of a sudden you have 30 people that are ready to buy a house this year because you helped facilitate that?
yeah.
Wouldn't that be awesome
That
this
would
down
be
year? So
phenomenal.
that's what we're trying to do, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Now we're looking
exactly.
back, oh, we should have thought of this 5 years ago.
Yeah, I think, and that's the way we create and value for our members is, back to your original thought of the purpose of the class. We're creating value for our members, creating opportunities for them to build it in the community, and to build a sense of community and to fill that pipeline. I love it. Um, Jamie, do you have anything you'd like to know?
No, I'm excited about it. I think
I am too.
I'm hoping we reach the people and we get people to come.
Yeah. Yeah, I
That's,
think it's going to
I
be
think it'll
really
be great.
exciting. Yeah. Denise, did you have any thoughts you'd like to?
Trying to unmute myself, sorry.
It's okay.
No, but I think that's a good, I mean, that's a great idea. And I think that even for like the banks, because we have a lot of clients that I think could utilize this information and, you know, help them in buying a new home. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I think that we could reach out to, or at least
That's a
try
good
to.
idea. That's actually a group we
Yeah.
hadn't thought about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I mean, I deal with it all the time. You know, they come in and want to know about buying a house and then they just go away. and a lot of them need help like this. And I think that
Yeah.
it would be great to maybe even advertise. We could do that here at the bank for
Mhm.
those meetings and stuff,
Oh, thank you.
just to try to reach those clients.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. We'll follow up on that.
I
Well,
think one of the things to realize is that a lack of knowledge is paralyzing.
yeah,
And there's a lot of people that if they are brave enough to come into an office and ask for a realtor and say, hey, I'm thinking about buying a house. I don't know where to start. That takes a lot of bravery. And because as realtors, we're in the trenches of that, and we see that happen more frequently, we forget how the heart that's beating of that person that's walking
yeah,
through the door, and that's
yeah,
what we're trying to help with. We're trying to make it just easier for them to be brave.
yeah, yeah. It, I'm so excited. And I think that this whole conversation has been a great introduction to what we're working on at KCAR. And if anyone that's watching is interested in joining the IDEA committee or any of our other committees, I encourage them to reach out. We're going to be cut off here in just a minute. So I'm going to just wrap things up real quick. Thank you, Kathy, so much. Thank you for your leadership. I'm so glad that you raised your hand and volunteered this year.
It's
So,
my pleasure.
yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, everybody.